Hey there everybody, it's markcrilley. I'm back with another video. Today we're going to be learning how to draw L from the massively popular manga and anime series Death Note. Now, some of you may remember I did an L video before, but that was a chibi version. It was almost 2 years ago that I did that one, and ever since then people have been saying, Mark, can you show us how to draw the real L? And, your wish is my command. Here at youtube.com/markcrilley. We aim to please, and so I've come back to do a drawing, how to draw L as he appeared in the manga and the anime series. Now what we have here is a perfect square, as I like to do with these videos, and the dimensions, 5.5 inches on all sides. That works out to almost exactly 14 centimeters. How about that? And you just cross down the middle to divide it into 4 squares, and that'll help you for placing these lines. Let's go ahead and begin with the basic guidelines for the head. Alright, so here you have the shape of the head, fairly close to real human anatomy in terms of the shape. We have lines coming across here that are going to help me place the eyes later on. Notice that if you take both of these lines and look at them in relation to the top of the head and the chin, just a little closer to the chin. Very common in manga anime style illustrations to do that, shifting the facial features down just a bit. And then I got a curving vertical line here, which will later help us place the nose and the mouth. But for now I want to go ahead and draw the guidelines for the rest of the body. Let's begin by getting a line in for the shoulders. So you see I've put in a line here for the shoulders. He's going to be in the sort of classic hunched over L pose that you so often see him in, kind of curled up into a ball almost. And I went ahead and put in a guideline here for the collar of his shirt. And basically, yeah, if you're trying to replicate this pose, you're going to want to pay attention to where this line curves into this square. I mean, he's really going to be shifted over here. We're not going to use so much of this side of the box, but I like to begin with a square since it's such a easily replicatable shape. So anyway, let's move on to drawing. Well, I'll get the hands and maybe the forearms in place. Alright, so you can see I'm not getting into the details of the hands here. They sort of look more like mittens or paws or something, but just getting some basic guidelines in here for the shape. His fingers are going to be curling over his knees with both of the legs coming down here eventually. But again, if you are trying to replicate this pose exactly, notice how this hand, the fingers are coming across that central line that we put down. This one not quite touching that line. Well, let's go ahead and maybe just finish it off. I'm going to draw the legs and the feet. So there we have the last of the lines. Notice again that the feet, like this one foot, is touching that bottom line, this one not quite, pointing in 2 different directions, which actually is nice for all manner of poses. When the feet point in slightly different directions like that, it tends to look more natural than if they're pointing in exactly the same direction. I'm almost done with the guidelines. I'm going to refocus the camera so we can get a little closer in on the face. So you can see I've placed really just the 3 or I guess 4 different facial features here, the irises of each eye, and notice the blank space there, how it's actually a little closer to the side of the head than it is to that central line. And then the nose and the mouth, and as so often the case when you're going for accurate anatomy, the mouth tends to be a little closer to the nose than it is to the chin. Well, I'm going to knock it off with all the time lapse. Do you know, I always say knock it off with the time lapse. Have you noticed that? It's like one of those angry old guys. Hey, you kids! Knock it off with all the time lapse down there! In any case, I'm erasing away these guidelines, which might make you think, what was the point of drawing the guidelines if you're just going to erase them? Well, I'm going to leave them a little faintly here. You can see how the central line helped me for getting the nose and the mouth in the right place, getting them to sort of line up. Happens a lot, actually, in a 3/4 point of view, that there a certain relationship develops between they're having a relationship, people, between the placement of this far away eye, the nose, and the mouth. So that's something you can pay attention to, not just for drawing L, but drawing 3/4 views of the face in general. Anyway, I'm going to leave this faintly because the top and bottom line for the eye will indeed help me as I go in now to begin drawing the upper and lower eyelids for L's eyes. And so I'm going to come in here, and he does sort of have unusually shaped eyes, I think, compared to a lot of manga characters, very sort of almond-shaped eyes. Certainly, you know, a one-of-a-kind character in so many different ways. I think one of the all-time great characters ever created. And I don't mean just in the manga world, I think in storytelling of all types. So you can see me putting in the, they end up sort of almond-shaped. I'm going to come down here, and he gets the bags under his eyes. Lack of sleep. But that lower eyelid line does in fact line up with that earlier line that I had put in. And I believe these two lines do tend to connect over here on the far edge, but I may be, you know, obscuring that a little bit with the hair later on. And of course the hair is a big part of the L design, the look of L. I have to be careful with not going too dark on these lines. I make it look like he's wearing mascara or something, but there is a sort of a certain darkness and thickness to these lines. You have to sort of strike a balance. In any case, getting this line into place, I can begin to refine. And certainly this area over here, I'm not going to bother to draw it because I'm planning on having hair come in front of that later on. What are you going to draw, Crilly? And I guess I'll go ahead and do the sort of dilated pupils that we often see, leaving a highlight here. But this area in here is going to get darkened in. And we're going to leave the edge a little lighter, although his eyes do look pretty, you know, dark and black. And for the nose, you know, I had just put in one line, but actually the drawing style, like I said, you know, tip of the hat, or thanks for the entire existence of this video to Takeshi Obata, who, you know, designed this character, tends to draw characters more anatomically accurate than you see in a lot of manga styles, and so that means that you are delineating the nose a little more, getting a line for the nostril in there. And I'm going to go ahead and get a little bit of the sort of curve of the lips here. I'm going to have to erase to get that more accurate. There we go. And I think he does generally tend to also draw a line for the lower lip, which is, again, something that you don't always see in manga illustrations. And I'm going to sort of refine this shape so that we have maybe a little curve to the chin rather than it coming to a point. And then maybe come up here and give some suggestion of the cheekbone as it heads up here. And we reach the area of the hair. And speaking of which, it's time to get into that. So I'm going to go ahead and start drawing L's hair. And there's a sort of a system to it. I don't think it's exactly the same every time you see, but certainly there is one big pointing strand of hair that comes down here between the eyes. The whole structure of the hair seems to be based on the idea of a loose part that's happening over here somewhere. And as a result, you get a lot of curving lines coming across. So anyway, if you want to try to replicate this, get one strand that's coming down between the eyes, and then you get another much longer strand that's cutting right across here, all the way past the side of the head. And you're going to end up with several strands that sort of work together here on this side. They're working together. Come on, strands, let's work together. So I'm going to split this into about 3. And this is where I think, you know, even Obata would not be like trying to get it exactly the same every single time. I mean, whose hair is exactly the same every single time? Unless he's using really good mousse or something. Yeah, I got the basics of that in place. I guess I want to start to talk about how the final contour of the hair goes well beyond his the line here of the top of his scalp. Let's come over here, and I'm going to begin to talk about this this loose part. You certainly don't see a line for like the part in his hair, but you do have a sense that it starts over here on the left And then everything else is kind of responding to that. And flowing away from, you know, say like this point right here in a way. You treat that as your decisive point, and everything else starts to flow away. Most of the lines are curving in a similar direction. I think every once in a while you might get a stray strand that goes in the opposite direction. See how this is curving that way? Maybe get another little strand down here. Why not? Let's be generous with our strands. Enough of this stinginess. And then, yeah, so you can see this really is, compared to the initial line of the scalp, really quite full-bodied. He's got very full-bodied hair. Al is the envy of people everywhere. Man, if only I had hair like Al. You can see, actually, people with hair like Al at pretty much any anime convention you go to. You see some kind of amazing cosplay of people dressed up as Al. Crilly, you're not even talking about how to draw anymore. You're talking about conventions. I don't know. I sort of committed to the idea of trying to do this central part of the video real time, and you know how it is, folks. I sometimes run out of things to say. But I guess now that I think about it, you know, most of these strands coming down, sort of curving down, but then there's a whole little section over here where they are curving up. So I guess I was wrong. That thing I said earlier, please ignore it. It was completely wrong in every way. And then over here, even I get a little confused about the structure, but I think you've got a lot of hair strands that are heading off in a somewhat horizontal direction. And then over here, right next to the eye, maybe, is where you have several, almost looks like a claw, like a raven's claw or something coming down here, kind of fanning out a little bit, but, you know, pointing in a noticeably different direction than those other hairs did. And back here somewhere, buried beneath it all, is an indication of his ear, which I probably should have put in at the start. But I'm going to leave the hair for now. I think we've spent more than enough time on it. Let's move on to drawing. Well, I'm going to double up the line here of the collar of his shirt, which is something I saw in at least some of the illustrations. I think it is part of his shirt, but you can always see this sort of hem. Is that what that's called? And then here, from this point of view, we can see an indication of his collarbone, and then maybe just one line here for his neck, coming up to the head, and as he's sort of leaning forward. And there probably would be other lines for the neck back there, but it's all obscured by his hair. And let's see. Excuse me, I do have a little bit of a cough this morning, so my apologies if my voice is a little rougher than usual. Let's come across here and start to draw his fingers. Hands are, of course, notoriously difficult to draw, and I struggle with them just like anyone else does. Happily, in this pose that we often see L in, the fingers do sort of line up. He's not like doing any strange gesture or anything. He's just sort of clasping his own knees with his hands. And notice how the longest finger is the sort of central one. These two fingers are a little shorter. I don't know how clear this is, but this should always be the longest of the fingers. And then the pinky should always be dramatically shorter. Just a little tip there about drawing hands. And I'm going to get his thumb right over here, so it looks like he is sort of either clasping or just sort of resting his hand on the top of his knee. Let me know what you think of this approach of going all real time here in the middle of the video. I know some people get bored, and but then other people find it really helpful to not have any time lapse. I mean, some people don't want any time lapse at all for the entire video. And, you know, I've tried that, but it's very challenging. Anyway, to get this one, I think I'm going to put a little bit of structure in here. Let's put this line here for the knuckles, and then come across here and begin doing it. I'm going to do the same thing like I just talked about with, you know, this being the pointer finger. This would be the longest of the fingers here, the middle finger. And the next finger, I'm always bringing it back just a little with my knowledge that it tends to be, you know, shorter than that central finger. And then, of course, the pinky, the smallest, the shortest of them all. But by putting in that initial line, this is going to allow me to sort of line up the knuckles here. And that hopefully is somewhat correct in terms of anatomy. Vaguely within the ballpark of human anatomy. Over here, it's time to put on his long-sleeved white shirt. And I do believe he's always wearing long sleeves, and it does sort of appear to always to be the same kind of white shirt. Who knows? Is he one of those guys where you open up the closets of his wardrobe and it's just the exact same pair of pants and white shirt over and over again? Well, you know what we can do over here as we move into the rest of the video is start to talk about clothing wrinkles. I'm going to refocus the camera so that we can see more of the not just his shoulder and arms, but maybe also the pants, and we'll just devote a lot of the remaining part of this video to talking about wrinkles in general. So yeah, I think this is a good way of expanding the topic of this video a little bit beyond simply drawing L from Death Note to learning something in general about clothing wrinkles, which I think all of us struggle with. I know I do. I'm putting in a line here for his sleeve, which is sort of flopping down, and notice how I put a curve there that sort of reveals the form of his wrist. But over here, I'm going to show you one of my techniques for putting a wrinkle. I've probably shown this in previous videos, but it's been a while. What I would do is start here and make the contour of how the wrinkle sort of breaks the contour, then make a line that's all connected. And then here, without connecting the line, just leaving a little bit of a gap, I make another line that curves across. And that little technique there of drawing a wrinkle in the clothing is something that you'll see me do again and again. In fact, I'll show it over here. I'll erase away right here so as to kind of repeat that same technique. Coming right across his arm, creating this sort of first of the two lines. It's like a formation that I use again and again. And somehow by not connecting those two lines, you end up with something that looks a little more cloth-like. At least I feel it does. So over here, and a lot of times when I'm trying to draw a shirt, I try to get in the sort of seam where the shoulder joins the upper arm. And that just sort of helps me almost in an organizational way to figure out where these lines are going to go. It's sort of like you're always scared that it's going to turn into some kind of huge mess of lines. And that is kind of an anchor line for me, you know, that line that goes across the shoulder, because it's like, all right, I know that needs to be there, and then I can sort of decide what happens with the rest of the wrinkles. Wrinkles tend to occur near the shoulder area anyway, so that's why you see me putting in a bunch right there. I think maybe I'll try once again my little patented contour wrinkle technique. Don't want to overdo it, but that is something that... And then also at the elbow, we tend to see lots of wrinkles, so I'm going to go in here and get an extra one. And yeah, that's kind of, you know, one of the big things with clothing wrinkles is knowing when to stop. You don't want to overdo it and end up with too many. And like I said, it very quickly sort of devolves into a mess of lines. So I'm going to put maybe one more right here. And then stop with all this wrinkle stuff, although I think we need some over here, just to give some sense of his shoulder over there. Now down here, as we move into drawing the jeans, I believe it's blue jeans that he wears, anyway, blue pants that I saw. Maybe they are dress pants, I'm not sure, but you're going to see a lot of wrinkles right here at the knee, and I guess what I'll do is I'll go ahead and get a secondary line in here that sort of gives you the basic sense of how his lower leg is separate from the thigh back here. But what I imagine is going to happen right here is you're just going to have a whole bunch of lines of wrinkles that are kind of curving across at the area of the knee. And if you observe in real life, this just tends to happen with cloth, as you would imagine. It just starts to bunch up in that area as you're pulling the leg so tightly across. Now here's another situation where I will use a sort of a seam, or I think seam is the right word, to help sort of organize my drawing of the cloth. And what I'm going to do is say, let's see if I can put a straight seam in here. And I like to have the seam get sort of shattered almost by the wrinkles of the cloth. See how it's like one seam, but the wrinkles are forcing it to fold over and over, so it ends up, breaking into separate bits. And then I suppose you might be able to see a little of it over there. But getting a seam in place like this is, for me, very helpful, and especially when I feel a little lost about, where do the wrinkles go? Getting a seam in place like that, just, again, it's like an anchor to me. It sort of organizes things a little bit. I'm going to come down here. Actually, sorry about this, folks, but I think I better refocus one more time. So yeah, I wanted to refocus to show the bottom part of the pants as it comes across the front of his bare feet, as he is so often depicted not wearing shoes. Elle doesn't wear shoes. There are no shoes in this world good enough for Elle. But you can see how I'm using the foot as a, helping me get a sense of how the cloth would curve across. You're always trying to let the cloth reveal the form underneath it. I mean, not always. I suppose sometimes you have puffy clothing that wouldn't do that. But anyway, certainly here I'm trying to make the cloth reveal the form of his foot underneath as we come down to the bottom. And down where the at the very bottom of a pant leg, depending on the material of the cloth, you can see kind of an insane number of wrinkles that will occur down there. Insane. Dude, it is insane, the number of wrinkles that you see down there. And I spent a fair amount of time talking about the hands. I don't know if I want to go too far in terms of drawing the feet, but you can see me start with the big toe. Always start with the big toe. And then just go ahead and get it. Sort of like each one of these lines of the other toes has a slight angle in the middle of it. It's sort of like a two-part line, the way I draw them anyway. And I guess I should go ahead and get the toenails in there. I think later on I may also get indications of the fingernails. You can see me struggling a bit here to try to get the anatomy right. Hands and feet, people. Those are like always tough. Doesn't matter how many years you've been drawing them. You always struggle. I do anyway. And over here, I think I will allow myself to bring back in my pal, Old Man Time-Lapse, because it's going to be very similar what I do here. So let's speed things along just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of this lower leg in time-lapse, and then maybe come back to use real time for finishing off this last bit. Alright, so we're almost done. I'm going to go back here and continue this idea of the seam, which, beginning here at the knee, would come across like so, and then as it comes closer to the area of his waist, also beginning to sort of zigzag or shatter into different parts as, again, wrinkles begin to form near the waist. So, hopefully that has, expanded the utility of this video past simply drawing one particular pose to giving you some pointers about drawing cloth in general. So much of it comes down to sort of imagining what the physics and the forces, like what direction where the cloth is being pulled across his thigh. So I'm putting in some wrinkles that sort of indicate that direction. And yeah, I would think there would be quite a lot of wrinkles up here, just as it sort of curves out of view. And I think that kind of brings us to the end of the basic lines. Let me refocus the camera, and maybe I'll talk a little bit before I start going into shading. All right, well, this is probably another one of these videos where I just spent so much time on the drawing part of it that I can't make it about the shading. But I am just going to talk a little as I refine the hair here about my plans for what I'm going to do with the rest of this. I'm going to be thinking in terms of light coming from the right-hand side, so that's going to certainly affect my shading choices, putting all the shade over here on the left-hand side of things. And then actually what I'm going to do, and it's been a while since I did one of these, I'm going to scan it into my computer. I'm going to change the contrast, maybe even introduce a little bit of a blue tint. And, you know, I'm using Photoshop to do this, but you don't need Photoshop to, to adjust to the contrast of an image. Almost any photo editing software will do. So I don't want to get too much into the technicalities of that, but I'm going to go ahead and in time-lapse do a lot of shading, but I'm not going to pull out my trusty black Prismacolor. No, siree. I am going to just take the pencil, scan it in, and let the computer heighten the contrast, darken the lines for me, and then also, you know, sort of introduce a little bit of a bass tone to the illustration. Bass tone. Sounds like musician talk. Anyway, I'm going to put it. There's going to be a sort of a tone, a bluish tone to it, a tint that will allow me to come back with my beloved white gouache and do some cool little lighting effects at the end. So bear with me. A lot of time lapse is going to occur just now, but it will allow us to wrap things up sooner rather than later and get on to the end of the video. Alright, so I finished with all the shading. I scanned it in the computer. As you can see, hopefully you can see, that I tried to tint it a little bit blue. Printed it out, and now I have my beloved white gouache, opaque white paint, and I'm going to be using just, you know, diluting it just a touch with water so as to begin applying sort of the light source, a little glint of light off of one side of all of his clothing, maybe a little off the side of his face and so forth. And this is just a little trick that I've come up with. It's a fun way of going beyond a simple pencil drawing to giving it a little extra something. Because you get that, as I said, there's like this base color there that happens when you print it out. And because that color is there, this sort of grayish, bluish color in my case, it allows the white to really pop, and it begins to look as if there's some lamp or something, you know, off to the side, a little bit behind him maybe. I thought it would fit, especially with this character, L, to have him sort of backlit and slightly spooky looking. So anyway, that is a little trick you can use. People do sometimes ask, can I use liquid paper or correction fluid instead of white gouache? I really wouldn't recommend it. That stuff dries so fast, it's very hard to manipulate it the way you could with white paint. I'd say stick with white gouache. So easy to buy. I mean, if you go to a craft store, they will have it. And it's not that expensive. So there's my little plug for white gouache. Not for any particular brand. All of the companies are working hard to bring you the very finest white gouache they can. In any case, let me go ahead and use time-lapse one last time just to finish off the highlights, and then I'll be back with a few final words. Alright, well there's my video on how to draw L from Death Note. Let me know what you thought of it, and especially what do you thought of this technique using the printout and the white gouache. I don't think I've ever done it for one of these fan art videos before, but I could certainly do it a little more often, if you want me to, in the videos ahead. But for now, let me go ahead and thank anyone who has supported me by getting any of my books, like Miki Falls, Brody's Ghost, my graphic novel series, as well as The Realism Challenge, my book about how to make hyper photorealistic illustrations. And, of course, Mastering Manga and Mastering Manga 2, my How to Draw books. Always super, super appreciative of anyone who helps me out by getting those books. But let's go ahead and lay down this brush. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you found it useful. And I'll be back with another one real soon.